world in Mythical Ireland. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Mythical Ireland Library. This is Live Irish Myths, episode number 147. I'm Anthony Murphy. You're all very welcome this evening on this, the last day of May. 3 weeks now to summer solstice and the longest day of the year. Some fabulous weather here in Ireland. Hope wherever you are watching in the world that the weather is also suiting you very nicely. We've had a couple of very warm days, a bit breezy today, but dry and sunny and warm yesterday. Sunday, a fabulous day. Temperatures in the early 20s Celsius. Feeling like summer has finally arrived after a lot of recent rainfall. Apparently, we've had the wettest May on record. As I say, you're all very welcome along. I hope that you're settled in nicely for the conversation. I'm sorry that I didn't manage to advertise it today. How lazy of me, or how remiss of me. I do apologize. I had a very busy day at work and for one reason or another. Anyway, it's very good of you to join us. Tonight, I'm going to be reading a couple of chapters from Douglas Hyde's A Literary History of Ireland. And believe it or not, this isn't a boring lecture about literature. This, I think, you'll find very interesting, especially with relevance to our previous explorations of Irish mythology and the sources for same. But before I do that, I should announce that if you're watching this video afterwards on YouTube, bear in mind that this is a recorded live stream. I continually get comments on YouTube from people wondering when the bloody thing is going to start because they can't believe how long they have to wait for the hellos and all that. So usually what I do is in the description underneath the video on YouTube, I put the timestamp that you can fast forward to in order to skip past all the introductions. In the meantime, it behooves me to say hello to Tom Byrne, who says hello from County Limerick. Good evening, Tom. Hope the weather in Limerick is as good as it is in County Louth. Ria O'Leary is in the house. Good evening to you. Welcome along. Vicky Wallace-Southall is saying hello, my lovely friends, and hello to you. And of course, if he's watching, to Evan and to Chile as well. Very good evening from a very sunny Bowen Valley. A little bit of hazy cloud, but the sun is still shining through nonetheless. Anna Christina says, hey, well, hey, right back to you, and good evening to you. Welcome along to Live Irish Myths. Paul Alburl is on the Alabama Gulf Coast in Daphne, Alabama. Good to see you, Paul, one of the regulars. You are very welcome along. Barbara Murphy, well, it is always a great pleasure for me to invite or to welcome other Murphys into the Murphy household. You're very welcome, Barbara. I hope you're in fine fettle. Daisy Peters says, hi, my dearest Tua and Anthony. Good evening to you, Daisy. Welcome along. Kerem Gogus is in the house. Hello, dear friends. Awesome. Yes, you are, Kerem. Guido Bruce is also in the house. Hello, Guido. You're very welcome to Live Irish Myths. Great to see you as well. All the familiar faces, which is brilliant. Sue Prenter is in the house. Evening, everyone. Great surprise. Yeah. I'm sure you're really shocked about the fact that there's a live stream on Monday evening at 8 o'clock. Not a conversation episode this week, just a regular. Doris O'Hara is in the house, says, hi, Anthony and everyone. Fáilte, Doris, Banachthi, Adina Sparks is also here. Hello, Adina. Everyone in good form, I hope. Well, I can only speak for myself, in good form here, so thanks. Evan and Chile are waving. Good stuff. Everybody wave at Evan and Chile. Say hello. Archaeoastronomy Database is in the house. Great to be here. Well, it's always great to have you here with your exceptional knowledge of all things ancient astronomical. Henry Scullion. Oh, I may as well say hello too from the north. Is that the north of Ireland or anywhere in particular, Henry? Could be the north of Sweden, could be the North Pole. I know, it's the north. There only is one north, I know. Kimberly Halligan says, hi, Anthony and Tua. Glad you're having great weather. We had 3 cold, rainy days in New York. Well, I want you to keep them over there. Don't send those in our direction, please. John Main is in the house in a cold and wet southwest. I'm sorry to hear that, John. Hate to make you jealous, but it's a fabulous day here, fabulous evening. The sun is actually shining in. In fact, you may see the sunbeams here. Yes, Sun is shining in. Will I leave that on or will I pull the blind down? I think I'll leave it as a reminder of how nice it is. John, it's great to see you as always. Hope you're in good form. Bernardine Rooney OM says, best Irish voice ever. If there was an award for that, that would be a wonderful accolade. Thank you for the compliment. The full Irish, Gary is in the house. Trononoa, good evening, great and good to blessings. Another fine day on the sod. Yes, indeed. It certainly is in this part of the world. Natalia Lopez. Oh, lots of comments flying up the screen and I can't keep up with them, so I better hurry up. Says, hello everyone, winter has already settled in here in Buenos Aires, listening with a nice cup of tea. Well, that's exactly the thing to do. I am also fully prepared with my Darth Vader mug. Mine is a cup of peppermint tea with nothing added, I might add. Almost 100 expected here today. Ooh, sounds hot. Hope you get it. Anne Scott Doherty says, greetings from Oregon. Hello, Anne. You're very welcome to the library for our latest episode. Anne Scott Doherty. Sorry. Yes, indeed. Stop repeating yourself, Anthony. Judy Peacher Davenport is in Pittsfield in Illinois. Good evening to you, or good afternoon to you, Judy. And Bernardine is in Maine. Very good evening to you, Bernardine. Nice to have you on. Nick Eska Casterton is in the house. Hello to Nick, and hello from all of us. Who else is there? Anne McCallum. Hello, Anthony and the mighty Tua de Antone. Greetings from a much improved southwestern Ontario weather-wise. Last week, cold, wet and windy, November-type weather. I saw a funny cartoon today on Facebook, which involved 7 scenes, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it was the weather in Canada. And in every scene, the person was dressed differently. Sounds like Ireland, to be honest with you. Except for maybe we don't have such extremes of temperature. Robin Rickman is having Dublin Cuddle this evening. Sorry, wrong comment. Robin, how nice. I hope that will be followed tomorrow by some Irish stew and on Wednesday by some beef and Guinness pie. That sounds really nice. Send some over. Oh, wait, there's a pandemic. You can't. Damn, you'll have to eat it all yourself. How unfortunate for you. Elaine Dent Lingenfelter says, I caught you live this time. Yes, good stuff, Elaine. Hope you enjoy it. Neil Hughes and Mary are in the house from Coatbridge in Scotland, where it's gloriously sunny. Yes. And the Tay, that's Moira. Mary has the Tay. August Neil has the Fionn Jarrag, the red wine. Sounds lovely. Henry Scullion says, lol, yes, to the comment that there only is one north. Yes, indeed, there only is. Deborah Williams is in Hillsborough, Maryland. Doing fine, Deborah. Hope the form is good with you. Natalia says she loves the sun ray, which is rapidly disappearing. Anyway, I said I'd leave it on the screen, but it's a bit of a solstice effect. It's like being in Newgrange. It only lasts for a few minutes. Anna Christina is in the house. Hello, Anna. Welcome along to you. Who else? Tom King is here. Have you seen the light? Evening, Anthony, all the mighty two. I hope all in good fettle, all in good form, Tom. I hope the forge is well lit and active and producing the wonderful delights that we see from you. I know that I saw something on Instagram over the past couple of days, which was fantastic. Sandy McNabb wants to sing to us. Oro Shea de Vaha Valya. And come on, give us a song, Sandy. You're welcome to come in and sing. Shannon Donahue is in rainy Southeast Alaska. Well, I'm sorry, we could send some weather your way, except for our weather tends to move eastwards. And I'm told low pressure's on the way, so inevitably it'll be raining here before too long. Also in the north is Louise Sherrill, who is in Belfast. Good evening to you, Louise. Welcome to our live stream. Such a wonderfully eclectic gathering we have this evening. Joe Butler says hello to congratulations, Anthony, on more fines. Sorry I can't stay. We'll watch later. No problem, Joe. Thank you for everything and all your support and help in the background, which is greatly appreciated. And Janet says, or Boston for weather. I'm gathering that the Irish expats who emigrated to Boston felt right at home there, you know. So there you are. And Daisy was already missing our chats. Well, hopefully you are not going to be missing too much now. Hopefully you're going to be enjoying yourself. Have I got anything to say before I start? I will read a few more comments as they arrive. I wanted to say that another book you may have seen during the week. From time to time, I do a library clear out. I have to make room constantly for the new arrivals. Yes, there are new arrivals coming into the library regularly. I found a book that is a duplicate. It's called Irish Place Names by Deirdre Flanagan and Lawrence Flanagan. And it was, let me tell you a little bit about it. It was published by Gill and Macmillan in 2002. And is a very good introduction to the subject of Irish place names. Anyway, I'm flogging that. If you're interested in buying that, send me an email. mythicalireland@gmail.com is the address, and let me know if you're interested. Just to let you know, the buyer pays postage and packaging as well, but that's no problem, says you. I should remind you, please do remember that if you want to support Mythical Ireland, there are several ways you can do it. Most importantly is this one, patreon.com/Mythical Ireland. The address is right here on the live stream. If you want to support the work of Mythical Ireland, please consider becoming a patron. Patrons are rewarded with extra juicy content such as updates, photographs, podcasts, videos, etc., etc. And also there's merchandise at certain levels. So please consider becoming a Mythical Ireland patron. Grace Walker is in the house, as is Donna J. Moyers. You're both very welcome along. Grace is in New York. A very good afternoon to the Big Apple from the wee county in Ireland. Etane Scott is in Texas. I'm a dub a long way from home. But you brought a bit of home with you, I'm sure. And I hope you're not missing the old sod too much. Vicky tells us that fighter jets just blazed overhead for Memorial Day. They were so fast. Brilliant. And another way that you can support the work of Mythical Ireland is by making a one-off donation to PayPal. That's paypal.me/Mythical Ireland. Or, look, more importantly, again, as far as I'm concerned, is to buy copies of my work. Published so far in 2021, Return to Segish, and the first in a series of monographs, that's Finn and the Salmon of Knowledge, Mythology, Toponymy, and Cosmology. You'll get both of those on the Mythical Ireland website in the gallery and shop under books. And of course, all copies dispatched from Mythical Ireland headquarters here are signed by my good self. I should also tell you, on the subject of monographs, that the second monograph in the series is about Bowen, and it's tentatively called Bowen, Goddess of the Boyne River and the Milky Way. I can tell you that there is a significant update in that I have 90% of the writing done. I'm on the home stretch in the next couple of days, all going well in the next couple of evenings. I will complete the text and then I'll be into proofing and editing. And hopefully I'll be able to take pre-orders in the coming week on the website. So keep an eye out for that. I should tell you that the Bowen monograph, two things about it. First of all, that it's quite a lot more comprehensive than the Finn monograph. So the Finn monograph ran to a total of about 72 pages, 71 pages. And they will all be produced in this format, this size, with the same sort of cover design. Obviously, the words and the pictures different. It's very heavily referenced with footnotes and a comprehensive bibliography. The second thing I wanted to say about the Bowen monograph is that I believe, and I'm open to correction, that it will be the single most comprehensive work ever published about the deity that we know as Bowen, and she is the one who gave rise to the River Boyne, or who caused it to be formed. A very ancient creation myth, I believe, and an often overlooked deity, or one that is, in typical misogynistic fashion, referenced in the mythology according to who her husband is, or referenced according to the affair that she has with Dagda, the chief of the deities. But she is a deity in her own right, and her story is very, very important. Now, there aren't a huge amount of manuscript sources about her, but what I've managed to do, I think, is to give her a very comprehensive portrayal in this forthcoming monograph. So please, as soon as you see the pre-orders, don't forget to get your pre-order in. And help support the work, and it'll be greatly appreciated. As I say, I'm open to correction, but I don't believe there's a single book anywhere that deals with the entire story of Bowen as she is encountered in the manuscripts. I believe I've incorporated every single manuscript source about Bowen into this monograph. So hopefully when it comes to publication, you will get it and you will enjoy it. Trian on the Yerk is in the house. Finally made it to a live stream. Hello, everyone. Fáilte, Triana, good to see you. Conasatá too. Sandra Boothroyd is saying hello from Wales, just across the way. If I hung out the window and shouted at you, you'd probably hear me across the water. Sandrine Brady says, bonsoir, haven't been with you for a long time. Hope everyone's doing well. Good evening, Sandrine, and bonsoir, mon ami. Hope life is treating you well in Bonny, France. Jock Hammer is in the house. Hope all are well, all in good stead so far. Jock Hammer, Jock Jammer, even should I say? Yes, brilliant. So we're up to date. What time are we on? Let's call that 18 minutes. I apologize. I haven't got my notebook and pen at the ready. I'm so slovenly these days. It's impossible to get me to do things, you know. This is episode number 147. Let's call that 18 minutes. And also to say hello to Sylv Foreshi. Hi, Mr. Murphy. Lots of love from Loughney. Hello to you and good evening. William Sherry is in Ashbourne, which is in the county of Meath, just down the road, about 15 minutes of a drive from here. Very good evening to you. Hope you are in good form. Thank you for joining us. So, without further ado, let's delve into A Literary History of Ireland by Douglas Hyde. I should tell you that Douglas Hyde was a scholar who later became Ireland's first president. So there you go. I'll read a very brief introduction to Douglas Hyde, and this was written by Professor Brian O'Keefe. This book was originally published in 1899, I think. Let me just check that. Yes, and the first edition in this form was published in 1967, and this is a new edition with that introduction by Brian O'Keefe. I guess this was republished posthumously after Mr. Hyde's death. No man did more than Douglas Hyde, 1860 to 1949, member of a Protestant Anglo-Irish planter family, to further the causes of Irish nationalism and the Irish language. His work established him as a formidable leader of Irish opinion, and he may be regarded as a moving spirit behind the Irish intellectual revolution of the early 20th century and the fight for political autonomy. In his introduction to this new edition, Professor O'Keefe gives an admirable account of Hyde's career both as scholar and statesman. After 1915, Hyde devoted himself as Professor of Modern Irish at University College Dublin to his academic and literary pursuits. His election as President of Ireland in 1838 was, quote, a fitting culmination to a life's work, unquote. A contributor to the Irishman, The Nation, and other periodicals, Hyde had published collections of Irish folk tales, songs, prayers, among them the love songs of Connacht, and blasts against those whose support for the renewal of Irish studies was lukewarm or non-existent. It was, says Professor O'Keefe, in bringing Irish oral and literary tradition to the notice of a wide public that his achievement was greatest. In 1899 came the first edition of A Literary History of Ireland. Although handicapped by lack of printed catalogues of important collections of Irish manuscripts, and with very few works by Irish scholars available, Hyde collated and coordinated a mass of material, and also read deeply of manuscripts, some of which are still unpublished to this day. This achievement seems all the more remarkable when it is realised that not until the early 1900s did the scientific training of Celtic scholars in Ireland begin. Much research on Irish literature has been accomplished since Hyde's time, and much new material has come to light, but, writes Professor O'Keefe, quote, very few works have been produced to find a place beside Hyde's as histories of Irish literature down to modern times. Each has its merits, but none of them has superseded this pioneer work. Tonight, I intend to, if time allows, read from 2 chapters of this book called The Irish Elysium and Belief in Rebirth, and the other is called Early
Irish civilization. If you would bear with me for one moment, I do believe I have another tome by the good, was he ever Dr. Hyde? I presume he was. Anyway, Michael Pike is in the house. Hello, Michael. Welcome along. Glad you found us. Sorry, we missed you last week. Barb Jordan is in the house as well. Fulcha, and good evening. Deborah Williams is also here, watching on the TV. Imagine, even available on the big screen. Let me just see if I'm not mistaken. No, sorry. Yes, I definitely do have another Hyde work here, but can I put my hand to it? And the answer is... the answer is I have to organize my library better. Anyway, let us press on. Yes, indeed. Everybody comfortable? Have you got your comfortable armchair and your footstool? Hope you have your foot spa, maybe. Warm blanket over the shoulders if necessary. Masseuse, if that's what you know. Back rub, shoulder rub while you're listening. And perhaps something to imbibe. As I said, mine is a herbal tea. Maybe you prefer something stronger. A dram, perhaps. Anyway, this is the Irish Elysium and belief in rebirth. And that's annoying me. Before the end of the episode, I may make another effort to dig out my other Hyde work. Caesar... Alwyn Roy Badziak is in the house as well. Hello, Alwyn. A very good evening to you. Caesar, writing some 50 years before Christ about the Gauls and their Druids, tells his countrymen that one of the prime articles which they taught was that men's souls do not die, non interior animas, quote, but passed over after death from one into another, unquote. And their opinion is, adds Caesar, that this doctrine greatly tends to the arousing of valor, all fear of death being despised. So there you go. They're setting the tone for you straight away. And pardon me for the distraction. I want to make sure. Yes. A few years later, Diodorus Siculus wrote that one of their doctrines was, quote, that the souls of men are undying, and that after finishing their term of existence, they pass into another body, unquote. Adding that at burials of the dead, some actually cast letters addressed to their departed relatives upon the funeral pile, under the belief that the dead would read them in the next world. Timagenes, a Greek who wrote a history of Gaul, now lost, Strabo, Valerius Maximus, Pomponius Mela, and Lucan in his Pharsalia, all have passages upon this vivid belief of the Gauls that the souls lived again. This doctrine must also have been current in Britain, where the Druidic teaching was, to use Caesar's phrase, quote, discovered and thence brought into Gaul, unquote. And it would have been curious indeed if Ireland did not share in it. There is, moreover, abundant evidence to show that the doctrine of metempsychosis was perfectly familiar to the pagan Irish. And of course, metempsychosis is another word for reincarnation or transmigration of the soul. As may be seen in the stories of the births of Cuchulainn, Edain, or Etain as we call her, the two swineherds, Conall Cernach, Toan Macaril, and Aid Slánne. But there is not in our existing literature any evidence that the belief was ever elevated into a philosophical doctrine of general acceptance, applicable to everyone, still less that there was ever any ethical stress laid upon the belief in rebirth. Of course, if you've been watching the Live Irish Myths series, you will know certainly that we have dealt with the story of Tuchmark Etain in several episodes, at least 2, possibly 3. The story is in 3 sections. And in each, she is living basically the same. She's living as the same woman, but in 3 different existences. In the first, she is in the era of Angus and Midger at Newgrange, and later she is the spouse of Yochi Aram, the High King of Ireland at Tara. It is only the mythological element in the belief in metempsychosis which has come down to us, and from which we ascertain that the pagan Irish believed that supernatural beings could become clothed in flesh and blood, could enter into women and be born again, could take different shapes and pass through different stages of existence as fowls, animals, or men. What the actual doctrinal form of the familiar idea was, or how far it influenced the popular mind, we have no means of knowing. And of course, the same applies to many aspects of spirituality and the spiritual and religious and ritual beliefs and practices of the early Irish, especially in the pre-literate era in prehistory, for which we have no written record, but we only have the stories to rely upon. So we cannot say anything with certainty, but we certainly can theorize and speculate and hypothesize. But as Mr. Nutt well remarks, quote, early Irish religion must have possessed some ritual, and what in default of an apter term must be styled philosophical as well as mythological elements. Practically the latter alone have come down to us, and that in a romantic rather than in a strictly mythical form. Could we judge Greek religion aright if fragments of Apollodorus or the Metamorphoses were all that survived of the literature it inspired? Question mark, unquote. But of course, we do have quite a lot in terms of mythological tracts that survived, mainly thanks to the hands of the ecclesiastical scribes of the Middle Ages, who, for one reason or another, despite the fact that it did not altogether tally with their Christian and biblical worldview, wrote down a lot of the pre-Christian, what we might call pagan Irish mythology into their manuscripts. Alan Hoskins is in the house from Ballina, Killaloe in Tipperary. Good evening to you, Alan. You are very welcome to the live stream. Very good to have you along. Omar is in the house. You're very welcome. Fáilte isteach, Omar. And good evening to you from sunny Ireland. Lillian Cruz is also here. Hello, Lillian. Great to see so many of you especially given that it is, well, in the Northern Hemisphere at least, it is summertime, and perhaps one might expect or anticipate a slightly reduced audience as a result of the fact that there's allegedly nice weather out there. The most that can be said upon the subject then is that the doctrine of rebirth was actually taught with a deliberate ethical purpose, that of making men brave, since on being slain in this life, they passed into a new one amongst the Celts of Gaul, that it must have been familiar to the Britons, between whose Druids and those of Gaul so close a resemblance subsisted, and that the idea of rebirth, which forms part of half a dozen existing Irish sagas, was perfectly familiar to the Irish Gael, although we have no evidence that it was connected with any ritual or taught as a deliberate doctrine. In reconstructing from our existing literature the beliefs and religion of our ancestors, we can only do so incompletely and with difficulty from passages in the oldest sagas and other antique fragments, mostly of pagan origin, from allusions in the very early poems, from scanty notices in the annals, and from the lives of early saints. The relatively rapid conversion of the island to Christianity in the 5th century, and the enthusiasm with which the new religion was received, mitigated against any full transmission of pagan belief or custom. We cannot now tell whether all the ancient Irish were imbued with the same religious beliefs, or whether these varied, as they probably did from tribe to tribe. Probably all the Celtic races, even in their most backward state, believed, so far as they had any persuasion on the subject at all, in the immortality of the soul. Where the souls of the dead went to when they were not reincarnated is not so clear. They certainly believed in a happy other world, peopled by a happy race, whither people were sometimes carried whilst still alive, and to gain which they either traversed the sea to the northwest, or else entered one of the she mounds, or else again dived beneath the water. And there's a footnote, and I'm going to read the footnotes because I believe footnotes are just as important. And in the forthcoming, aforementioned, previously discussed monograph number 2 about Bowen, instead of what I did with the Finn monograph, putting the footnotes at the back of the book, I've put the footnotes at the bottom of each page to make them more easily accessible, because I believe they are a very important part of putting the story together. That for the sake of convenience and rapid sort of dissemination of the sources for the reader, that the footnotes are all close to the text, as they are here in Hyde's book. So here's the section, and here's the footnote at the bottom of the page. In a large collection of nearly 60 folklore stories taken down in Irish from the lips of the peasantry, I find about 5 contain allusions to the belief in another world full of life underwater, and about 4 in a life in the inside of the hills. We have discussed that too in a previous episode. I can't remember which one, but we certainly discussed, High Brazil and the idea of underwater monasteries and towns and cities. One that I documented in my book, Mythical Ireland, New Light on the Ancient Past, involved the belief current in the 19th or 20th century, I can't remember which, among the locals, that there was a village that had been inundated at some time in the past, and from time to time the buildings of which and the inhabitants of which were seen beneath the waves. The High Brazil type, that of finding the dead living again on an ocean island, is, so far as I have yet collected, quite unrepresented amongst them. An old Irish expression for dying is going, quote, to the army of the dead, unquote, used by Deirdre in her lament. And I find a variant of it so late as the beginning of this century in a poem by Raftery, a blind musician of the County Mayo, who tells his countrymen to remember that they must go, quote, to the meadow of the dead, unquote. See Raftery's Orchacus in my Religious Songs of Connacht, page 266. There's one I'll have to add to the library. Hyde's Religious Songs of Connacht. Pardon me, while I clear my throat. Excuse me. And I will take a mouthful of peppermint tea. Nothing added. In all cases, however, whatever the mode of access, the result is much the same. A beautiful country is discovered where a happy race, free from care, sickness, and death, spend the smiling hours in simple, sensuous pleasures. There is a graphic description of this Elysium in the Voyage of Bran, a poem evidently pagan and embodying purely pagan conceptions. I've had a brief look at the Voyage of Bran, and it does bear a lot of similarities to a tale that we did read on Live Irish Myths, which was the Voyage of Maeldoon. A mysterious female, an emissary from the lovely land, appears in Bran's household one day, when the doors were closed and the house full of chiefs and princes, and no one knew whence she came, and she chanted to them 28 quatrains, describing the delights of the pleasant country. And this is a quote. There is a distant isle, around which sea horses glisten, a fair course against the white swelling surge, 4 feet uphold it. And this, of course, is translated from the Irish. And the Irish does rhyme, but the English doesn't. Feet of white bronze under it, glittering through beautiful ages, lovely land throughout the world's age, on which the many blossoms drop. An ancient tree there is with blossoms, on which birds call to the hours. 'Tis in harmony, it is their wont, to call together every hour. And there's a footnote saying that Kuno Meyer, who was a German scholar, a philologist who wrote quite a lot and translated quite a lot of the Irish manuscripts, and was involved in which of the was it Revue Celtique or was it Zeitschrift? I can't remember. Possibly both. Anyway, Meyer says that there are a large number of word forms in the Voyage of Bran, as old as any to be found in the Wurzburg glosses. And these Professor Thurnyson, that's Rudolf Thurnyson, ascribes unhesitatingly to the 7th century. So there you go. Old, old, old. It continues. Unknown is wailing or treachery in the familiar cultivated land. There is nothing rough or harsh, but sweet music striking on the ear. Without grief, without sorrow, without death, without any sickness, without debility. That is the sign of Evan, uncommon, an equal marvel. A beauty of a wondrous land, whose aspects are lovely, whose view is a fair country, incomparable in its haze. The sea washes the wave against the land. Hair of crystal drops from its mane. Wealth, treasures of every hue are in the gentle land, a beauty of freshness, listening to sweet music, drinking the best of wine. Neil Hughes. Excuse me. Golden chariots on the seaplain, rising with the tide to the sun. Chariots of silver in the plain of sports, and of unblemished bronze. At sunrise there will come a fair man illumining level lands. He rides upon the fair sea-washed plain. He stirs the ocean till it is blood. Then they row to the conspicuous stone from which arise 100 strains. It sings a strain unto the host through long ages. It is not sad. Its music swells with choruses of hundreds. They look for neither decay nor death. There will come happiness with health to the land against which laughter peals. Into Imchun, the very calm place, at every season, will come everlasting joy. It is a day of lasting weather that showers down silver on the land. Love that. A pure white cliff in the verge of the sea, which from the sun receives its heat. And this is no longer quoting the Quatrains. Manannán, the Irish Neptune, driving in a chariot across the sea, which to him was a flowery plain, meets Bran thereafter, and chants to him 28 more verses about the lovely land of Moymel, the pleasant plain, which the unknown lady had described, and they are couched in the same strain. And here are a few of those quatrains. Hope everybody's in good form. Fian Jaragaboo. I'd love to hear it in the Irish, please, says Susie. Yes, so would I, but unfortunately it is only rendered in the English. So I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. Brendan Byrne is in the house. Brendan, good evening to you. I hope life is good down in Wicklow, County Wicklow. The King of Leinster, is this the same Bran? Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. I will try to ascertain. Though but one rider is seen in Moymel of many powers, there are many steeds on its surface, although thou seest them not. A beautiful game, most delightful, they play sitting at the luxurious wine. Neil Hughes. Men and gentlewomen under a bush, without sin, without crime. A wood with blossom and fruit, on which is the vine's veritable fragrance. A wood without decay, without defect, on which are leaves of golden hue. Then, prophesying of the death of Mungan, he sang, he will drink a drink from Loch Low, while he looks at the stream of blood. The white hosts will take him under a wheel of clouds to the gathering where there is no sorrow. Isn't that beautiful, isn't it?
I know of few things in literature comparable to this lovely description. This is Hyde writing again, obviously. At once so mystic and so sensuous, of the joys of the other world. To my mind, it breathes the very essence of Celtic glamour and is shot through and through with the Celtic love of form, beauty, landscape, company, and the society of woman. How exquisite the idea of being transported from this world to an isle around which sea-horses glisten, where from trees covered with blossoms the birds call in harmony to the hours, a land whose haze is incomparable. What a touch! Where hair of crystal drops from the mane of the wave as it washes against the land, where the chariots of silver and of bronze assemble on the plain of sports. In the country against which laughter peals, and the day of lasting weather showers silver on the land. And then to play sitting at the luxurious wine, men and women under a bush, without sin, without crime. I verily believe there is no Gael alive, even now, who would not in his heart of hearts let drift by him the Elysiums of Virgil, Dante, and Milton to grasp at the moimel of the unknown Irish pagan. Isn't that just fabulous? And I think that's an aspect of Ireland that remains very much alive. There is a romanticism of the other world, a belief I think still held by many people today of a magical other realm that is constantly on the cusp of bursting through into this one and making itself manifest, something that A.E. George William Russell wrote about and even painted. You know, this notion that what makes Ireland really, really very special as a place, as a spiritual place, is that it is a place of power, a place, a liminal, thin place, where one does get the sense at certain times, accentuated and greatly augmented at such times as sunrise and sunset, and when a mist descends, and in the twilight when the bats come out, as I have done on the shore of the Bowen River on some of the live streams, with the song of the curlew coming to your ear, that at any moment you will see thronging from the Shee those magnificent beings to tell you of the marvelous other world which they inhabit. And I think that's something that's very much alive, especially for those of us who are poetic and creative types. Perhaps not so much the scientists, but we will not allow their deadening hands to quell this wondrous vista, will we? Let me just catch up on any comments. Rose Quatrains is in the house. No Brown Zone. Conasata too. And hope you're in good form. Yeah, Neil Hughes. I also always think of Mel Townland in Drogheda also when I think of my Mel. And in fact, that is something I've mentioned in Island of the Setting Sun, that I think there might be a connection there. Kathy May Deo is in the house. Missed you all. I have a day off today here in Newcastle, Washington State, celebrating Memorial Day in honor of all those who've served our country for us. I think it was Vicky Wallace Southall who told us that the fighter jets flew over her house a short time ago, making a tremendous noise in celebration or in commemoration. Janet Walsh is in Minnesota in the USA. Good evening to you, Janet. Very nice to have your company. Kendall is also here. Silversmithing, very nice. You and our Smith Tom King would get on very well, I would say. Yes, indeed. In another perhaps equally ancient story, that of the elopement of Connla, son of Conn of the 100 Battles. Remember, we met, or certainly we encountered this. We encountered the birth of Conn in the story Arne Fingon's Night Watch, in which the woman of the Shee, Rothneve, which means wheel splendor, related to Fingon the marvelous miracles that were occurring in conjunction with the birth of Conn of the 100 Battles. Conn Céad Cathach one of the most illustrious of the great high kings of Tara. And in fact, I should again prompt the forthcoming, a mention of the forthcoming monograph on Bowen, because the very first miracle that is related by Rothneve to Fingon is the bursting forth of the Bowen River on the track of the woman warrior, Bowen. And I think you'll enjoy that greatly. In another, perhaps, yes, sorry. With a lady who is a denizen of this mysterious, sorry, I should read that again, shouldn't I, instead of skipping over it like that. In another, perhaps equally ancient story, that of the elopement of Connla, son of Conn of the 100 Battles, with a lady who is a denizen of this mysterious land, we find the unknown visitor giving nearly the same account of it as that given to Bran. Whence hast thou come, O lady, said the Druid. I have come, said she, from the lands of the living, in which there is neither death nor sin nor strife. We enjoy perpetual feasts even, without anxiety, and benevolence without contention. A large she, or F-word mound, is where we dwell, so that it is hence we are called the she people. The Druids appear, as I have already remarked, to have acted as intermediaries between the inhabitants of the other world and of this. And in the story of Connla, one of them chants against the lady so that her voice was not heard, and he drives her away through his incantation. She comes back, however, at the end of the month, and again summons the prince. "'Tis no lofty seat," she chanted, "upon which sits Connla amid short-lived mortals awaiting fearful death. The ever-living ones invite thee to be the ruler over the men of Tethra." And we've seen Tethra before because it's mentioned in Amergin's poem when the Milesians arrived, according to Laura Gawala. Who calls the cattle forth and sees them? Who calls the cattle of Tethra forth and sees them dance in the bright heavens? Conn of the 100 Battles, who had overheard her speech, cried, "Call me the Druid. I see her tongue has been allowed her today again." But she, invisible to all save the prince, replied to him, "O Conn of the 100 Battles, Druidism is not loved, for little has it progressed to honour on the great righteous strand, with its numerous, wondrous, various families." After that again she invites the prince to follow her, saying, "There is another land, which it were well to seek. I see the bright sun is descending, though far off we shall reach it ere night. 'Tis the land that cheers the mind of every one that turns to me. There is no race in it save only women and maidens." And Coda is getting rather excited in the yard. The prince is overcome with longing. He leaps into her well-balanced, gleaming boat of pearl. Those who were left behind upon the strand, quote, saw them dimly, as far as the sight of their eyes could reach. They sailed the sea away from them, and from that day to this have not been seen again, and it is unknown where they went to, unquote. Sounds like a fairy tale, doesn't it? They lived happily ever after. In the fine story of Cuchulain's sickbed, which is contained in the Laur Nahira, the Book of the Dun Cow, in which, though the language of the text is not so ancient, the conceptions are equally pagan, the deserted wife of Manannán, the Irish Neptune, falls in love with the human warrior and invites him to the other world, to herself, through the medium of an ambassadress. Female ambassador. Apparently, I'm learning a new one. Ambassadress. Coda, Kathy May Deo says hello. Yes, he's outside and enjoying the good weather. He doesn't like the rain. Can't imagine there are many animals apart from ducks who do enjoy the rain. Cuchulainn sends his charioteer Laeg along with this mysterious ambassadress, that he may bring him word again to what kind of land he is invited. Laeg, when he returns, repeats a glowing account of its beauty, which coincides closely with those given by the ladies who summoned Bran and Connla. And here follow 3 quatrains. There are at the western door, in the place where the sun goes down, a stud of steeds of the best of breeds, of the grey and the golden brown. I suspect the Irish has been forcibly made to rhyme in the English. There wave by the eastern door 3 crystal crimson trees, whence the warbling bird all day is heard on the wings of the perfumed breeze. And before the central floor is another of gifts untold, all silvern bright in the warm sunlight, its branches gleam like gold. In the saga of the wooing of Etain, and we have, of course, encountered that story on many occasions, and we devoted several episodes of Live Irish Myths, we meet with what is substantially the same description. She is the wife of one of the Tuatha De Danann, is reborn as a mortal, and weds the King of Ireland. Her former husband, Midger, still loves her, follows her, and tries to win her back. She is unwilling, and he chants to her this description of the land to which he would lure her. And some more quatrains. Come back to me, lady, to love and to shine, in the land that was thine in the long ago, where of primrose hue is the golden hair, and the limbs are as fair as the wreathed snow. To the lakes of delight that no storm may curl, where the teeth are as pearl and eyes as sloes, which alight whenever they choose to seek on the bloom of a cheek where the foxglove glows. Each brake is alive with the flowers of spring, whence the merles sing in their shy retreat. Though sweet be the meadows of Inishfoil, our beautiful vale is far more sweet. Though pleasant the mead be of Inishfoil, more pleasant the ale of that land of mine, a land of beauty, a land of truth, where youth shall never grow old or pine. Fair rivers brighten the vale divine, there are choicest of wine and of mead therein, and heroes handsome and women fair are in dalliance there without stain or sin. From thence we see, though we be not seen, we know what has been and shall be again. And the cloud that was raised by the first man's fall has concealed us all from the eyes of men. Then come with me, lady, to joys untold, and a circlet of gold on thy head shall be, banquets of milk and of wine most rare. Thou shalt share, O lady, and share with me. The casual Christian allusion in the penultimate verse need not lead us astray, nor does it detract from the essentially pagan character of the rest. For throughout almost the whole of Irish literature, the more distinctly or ferociously pagan any piece is, the more certain it is to have a Christian allusion added at the end as a make-weight. And I think that's very important. Apropos our previous discussions, the incursions, additions, emendations, subtractions. What's that word? What was it when you release a text but you have a whole pile of it is blanked out? What's that called? Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. Somebody will tell me. Sorry, I'm just taking a note there in the margin because that's important. Not retracted. Oh, yes. Redacted. Thank you. Look at them all. Loads of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people. Congratulations to Neil Hughes on being the first in. Peter Woods was closely behind, as was Kendall, and now loads of people are saying it. It was there. I said retracted. Yes, redacted. There is great ingenuity displayed in thus turning the pagan legend into a Christian homily by the addition of 2 lines, suggesting that if men were not sinful, this beautiful pagan world and the beautiful forms that inhabited it would be visible to the human ken. This was sufficient to disarm any hostility to the legend on the part of the church. Yes, indeed, very important, because we know that the scribes were in the employ of quite often
sponsors in the form of kings or kings who are allied with senior churchmen. So it had to be written down. It just didn't necessarily have to be written down in pure form. Sometimes it was altered to suit, as I say, a Christian worldview. From what we have said, it is evident that the ancient Irish pagans believed in the possibility of rebirth and founded many of their mythical sagas on the doctrine of metempsychosis, and that they had a highly ornate and fully developed belief in a happy otherworld or Elysium to which living beings were sometimes carried off without going through the forms of death. By the way, I'm very impressed. Also, Erasure, says Janet Walsh, great band. Yes. I'm very impressed that you're all paying so much attention. You're all just like a teacher asking the pupils, and all the hands are in the air. Miss, sir, you know. But it is impossible to say whether rebirth with life in another world, and for those whom the gods favoured, was taught as a doctrine or had any ethical significance attached to it by the Druids of Ireland, as it most undoubtedly had by their cousins, the Druids, in Gaul. So that is that chapter. I wonder whether, it being 2 minutes to 9, could you suffer another chapter, or will we leave it there and come back to it next week? I will await a quick indication. All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Speak like a horse. The next chapter I would propose to read is chapter 12, which is called Early Irish Civilization. And here I will take a moment to have a sup. Kendall says aye, first in there. And a deafening silence from everyone else, which suggests there are a lot of abstentions. Oh, yes, all of a sudden, loads. More. I'll suffer another. Keith Swift tells us that he will suffer another. Okay, Keith, suffer on, brave soldier. And mostly ayes. One more. One yes. Another more. Yes, okay, all right, okay, I get it. Fine, all right then. Another one it is, so. Because I didn't want that outcome. It has been frequently assumed, especially by English writers, that the prehistoric Irish, because of their remoteness from the continent, must have been ruder, wilder, and more uncivilized than the inhabitants of Great Britain. But such an assumption is, to say nothing of our literary remains, in no way borne out by the results of archaeological research. The contrary rather appears to be the case, that in point of wealth, artistic feeling, and workmanship, the Irish of the Bronze Age surpassed the inhabitants of Great Britain. When we read such accounts as that, for example, in the Book of Ballymote of Cormac MacArt taking his seat at the assembly in Tara, all covered with gold and jewels, we must not set it down to the perfervid, nice word, perfervid imagination of the chronicler without first consulting what Irish archaeology has to say upon the point. The appearance of Cormac, King of Ireland in the 3rd century, and perhaps greatest of pre-Christian monarchs, is thus described. Beautiful, says the writer, quoting probably from ancient accounts now lost, was the appearance of Cormac in that assembly. Flowing and slightly curling was his golden hair, a red buckler with stars and animals of gold and fastenings of silver upon him, a crimson cloak in wide descending folds around him, fastened at his neck with precious stones, a torque of gold around his neck, a white shirt with a full collar, and intertwined with red gold thread upon him. A girdle of gold inlaid with precious stones was around him, 2 wonderful shoes of gold with golden loops upon his feet, 2 spears with golden sockets in his hands, with many rivets of red bronze. And he was himself, besides, symmetrical and beautiful of form, without blemish or reproach. The abundance of gold ornament, which Cormac is here represented as wearing, is no mere imagination of the writers. It is founded upon the undoubted fact that of all countries in the west of Europe, Ireland was preeminent for its wealth in gold. If you want evidence of that, ladies and gentlemen, when time allows and when COVID-19 goes away, make sure to visit the National Museum of Ireland, and you will see there some fabulous examples of that. Brendan said that the break, the vote and the break between chapters was a good excuse to refresh the dram. Yes, I haven't had a dram yet, but I may have one. I may have one for medicinal purposes, of course, before or after we finish, but before bedtime. How much wealthier was Ireland than Great Britain may be imagined from the fact that while the collection in the British Museum of prehistoric gold from England, Scotland, and Wales together amounted, a couple of years ago, to some 36 ounces, that in the Royal Irish Academy in Dublin weighs 570 ounces. And of course, the collection of artifacts and archaeological items in the Royal Irish Academy was later donated to the National Museum upon its foundation. Yes, Janet is agreeing, and indeed it is fantastic. And I hope I can return to in future to visit Ireland. We hope that too, and we hope to see you back here. Rowan, yes. I wonder how many people notice the first item when you walk in the door, which is that piece of flint found at Mel. We mentioned Mel in the last chapter, Moy Mel, and Neil Hughes was saying how Moy Mel always reminds him of the townland of Mel, which is here in Drogheda, just north of the River Boyne, about a mile from here. And that piece of flint found by the late, great Dr. Frank Mitchell, believed to have been worked by human hands around 300,000 years ago. There you go. Royal Hill of Tara Ranger, who is Paul, says, well, what's the crack? Well, Paul, indeed, we haven't seen you in ages. You may have got stepped on a stray sod somewhere or entered some sort of she realm and been captivated. And that's exactly what we're talking about. Hope you're in good form. And great to see you. And yet the collection in the Academy, sorry, Neil is saying, wow, yes, but I should add that Professor Mitchell didn't believe that flint core was in the place where it had been worked. He reckoned it had been carried there possibly by glacial meltwaters. And yet the collection in the Academy contains only a small part of the gold finds made in Ireland. You get the sense here that Hyde is engaging in a little bit of a competition, you know. It's a case of nah. We've more gold than you. For before 1861, when the new law about treasure trove came into force, great numbers of gold objects are known to have been sold to the goldsmiths and melted down. The wealth of Ireland in gold, some of it found and smelted in the Wicklow Mountains. There you go, Brendan. Must have, at an early period, determined continental trade in its direction. And we have seen that Tacitus reported its harbours as being better known through trade than those of Great Britain, or, on the most unfavourable reading of the passage, as being known by commerce and merchants. I'm going to read the footnote about smelting in the Wicklow Mountains, because I like reading the footnotes. In the Irish annals, gold is said to have been first smelted in Leinster. As late as the last century, native gold was discovered on the confines of Wicklow and Wexford, and nuggets of 22, 18, 9, and 7 ounces are recording as having been found there. Mr. Coffey, who's undoubtedly George Coffey, I think he was the first keeper of antiquities of the Irish Museum, I believe, wrote a book about Newgrange in the early 20th century, quotes a most interesting account by a Mr. Weaver, director of the works established there by the Irish government before the Union to look for gold. The discovery of native gold in Ballinvalley Stream at Crohan Kinshalla, says Mr. Weaver, was at first kept secret, but being divulged, almost the whole population of the immediate neighbourhood flocked in to gather so rich a harvest, actually neglecting at the time the produce of their own fields. This happened about the autumn of the year 1796, when several hundreds of people might be seen daily assembled, digging and searching for gold in the banks and bed of the stream. Wow. Considerable quantities were thus collected, this being, as it subsequently proved, the most productive spot, and the populace remained in undisturbed possession of the place for nearly 6 weeks, when government determined to commence active operations. Regular stream works were soon established, and up to the unhappy time of the rebellion in May 1798,
when the works were destroyed, government had been fully reimbursed its advances, the produce of the undertaking having defrayed its own expenses and left a surplus in hand. The total amount of gold collected from this place in the last 100 years is valued at about £30,000. And remember that this was first written in 1899, so that's probably the equivalent of several million euros in today's money. This particular spot had been probably overlooked, as Mr. Coffey remarks, by the searchers of early days, but no doubt other auriferous streams in the Wicklow Mountains had given up their gold long since in prehistoric times to the ancient workers. See Coffey's Origins of the Prehistoric Ornament in Ireland. Dr. Fraser, on the other hand, does not believe that any great part of the gold found in Ireland is indigenous, and talks of Spain and South Russia and gold plundered from Britain. But if this be the case, what an enormous prehistoric trade Ireland must have carried on, or what a powerful invader she must have been to come by such quantities of gold! He has since supplemented this by another in the Journal of the Royal Society of Antiquaries, in which he leans to the opinion that the Roman aurei, A-U-R-E-I, the coins plundered from the Britons, were the real source of Irish gold. Yeah, not likely. Where was I? That was a long footnote. This has also been borne out by archaeologists. Professor Montelius, who has traced a close connection in prehistoric times between Scandinavia and the west of Europe, regards much of the prehistoric gold found in the northern countries as Irish. Speaking of certain gold ornaments found in Funen, which show, according to him, marked Irish influence, he writes, quote, "Gold ornaments like these have not been discovered elsewhere in Scandinavia, while a great number of similar ornaments have been found in the British Isles, especially in Ireland, whose wealth of gold in the Bronze Age is amazing," unquote. Again, he writes, quote, "As certain of the gold objects found in Denmark have been introduced demonstrably from the British Islands, probably from Ireland, the thought is obvious. Is not a great part of the other gold objects found in southern Scandinavia also of Irish origin and of the Bronze Age there? For this island, Ireland, was, during the Bronze Age, one of the lands of Europe richest in gold. No other country in Europe possesses so much manufactured gold belonging to early and medieval times," writes Mr. Ernest Smith. There you go. Robert Friend is in the house. Good evening, Robert. You're welcome along to the episode. 9-star. Yes, that was indeed a Star Wars mug. Don't make me destroy you. Yes, Coda is definitely agreeing. Don't make me destroy you. It is true that the Irish Celts, despite their mineral wealth, never minted coin, a want which has been adduced to prove a lack of civilization on their part. But as Mr. Coffey points out, coinage is a comparatively late invention. The Egyptians, for all their civilization, never possessed a native coinage, and even such ancient trading cities as Carthage and Gades or Gades, Gades, did not strike coins until a late period. A little reflection, says Professor Ridgway, shows us that it has been quite possible for peoples to attain a high degree of civilization without feeling any need of what are properly termed coins. The absence of coinage, adds Mr. Coffey, does not necessarily imply the absence of a currency system, and Professor Ridgway has shown that the ancient Irish possessed a system of currency or values and a standard of weights, notwithstanding the fact that in medieval times it seemed that your currency was your cows and you didn't need coinage because your cattle were your wealth. Fascinating here is that I'm getting the impression from certain writers, I'm getting a sort of a feeling of deja vu from our episodes recently about Geraldus Cambrensis, Gerald of Wales, the Norman historian, one might say propagandist, or as our good friend Professor Mallory says of him, he was carrying out a hatchet job on Irish history. That perhaps it's a case that, if you want to diminish or demean the people who you have conquered, that
in some way justifies your imperial assaults upon their freedoms. A most interesting paper by Mr. Johnson, a Dublin jeweller, recently read before the Royal Irish Academy, has shown with the authority due to an expert the marvellous skill with which the prehistoric Irish worked their gold, and the wealth of proper appliances which they must have possessed in order to turn out such unique and admirable results. The workmanship of Irish bronze articles is also very fine, and fully equal to that of Britain, while Greenwell considers their clay urns and food vessels superior to the British. In Ireland, he says the urns, quote, and especially the food vessels, are of better workmanship and more elaborately and tastefully ornamented than in most parts of Britain. Many of the food vessels found in Argyllshire and in other districts of the southwest of Scotland, as might be perhaps expected, are very Irish in character and may claim to be equally fine in taste and delicate in workmanship with those in Ireland, unquote. And I just want to read one of the footnotes here. A splendid find of gold ornaments made last year near the estuary of the Foyle River of a golden model of a boat. Oh yes, that's in the National Museum. Evidently a votive offering, fitted with seat, mast, oars, and punting poles. An exquisitely wrought gold collar, decorated in relief with the most beautiful embossed work, torques, neck chains, etc., has been dated from internal evidences as work of the 2nd century, the neck chains being clearly provincial Roman work of that date. It is to be regretted that these exquisite articles have found their way to the British Museum, where they will be practically lost instead of being added to the unique Irish collection in Dublin to which they properly belong. And as you can see, Douglas Hyde wasn't afraid of being a bit political in his writings. The brilliant appearance of Cormac MacArt when presiding over the assembly at Tara, covered with gold and jewels, receives enhanced credibility from the proofs of early Irish wealth and culture that I have just adduced. Let us glance at Tara itself as it existed in the time of Cormac, and see whether archaeology can throw any light upon the ancient accounts of that royal hill. It was round this hill that the great feis, or assemblage of the men of Ireland, took place triennially, once every 3 years, with a threefold purpose: to promulgate laws universally binding upon all Ireland, to test, purge, and sanction the annals and genealogies of Ireland in the presence of all men, so that no untruth or flaw might creep in, and finally to register the same in the great national record, in later times called the Psalter of Tara, so that cases of disputed succession might be peacefully settled by reference to this central authoritative volume. The session of the men of Ireland thus convened took place on the 3rd day before Samhain, November Day, and ended the 3rd day after it. We are told that Cormac, who presided over these assemblies, had 10 persons in constant waiting upon his person, who hardly ever left him. These were a prince of noble blood, a druid, a physician, a brehon, a bard, a historian, a musician, and 3 stewards. And Keating, that's undoubtedly Geoffrey Keating, Forras Fassa ar Éireann, Keating's History of Ireland, tells us that the very same arrangement was observed from Cormac's time in the 3rd century to the death of Brian Boru in the 11th, the only alteration being that a Christian priest was substituted for the druid. Rose is telling us something interesting there, which we will pause to read. I visited a museum in North Down, Bangor, NI. A set of swords were found near Bangor. A video talked of trade going on from Cornwall and Scotland for Ireland's gold. The tin from Cornwall to strengthen their bronze swords, though the swords ended up in the north. The hilt of the sword, I noticed, was gold and had a blue Lagos gemstone for its decor. Sounds lovely, Rose. Must visit when I get a chance. Frost Foxglove, torques are not Roman. There are a series of such Irish created torcs. You can see them in the National Museum. Highly recommend a visit if and when you get the chance. To accommodate the chiefs and princes... Hang on a second. Hang on. What am I talking about? Wait, one moment. I do, in my possession in this library, have treasures of the National Museum of Ireland. There's the boat that we were just talking about on the cover. Look at that. Now, let me just very quickly see if I can show you some examples of Irish gold objects. Yes, indeed I can. There's a gold collar, 3rd century BC from County Roscommon. Work of beauty. And another one, also from 3rd century from Roscommon. Sorry, I'll try not to get the light on it. Sorry, apologies about that. There was momentarily, yes, the Broiter hoard from County Derry, which I believe we were referencing previously, the boat and other objects. This page, Anthony, yes. Let me just see if I can quickly find you a torque. Torques, gold. Let's see, 84. Page numbers in italics are the ones that have photographs. Yes, indeed. 2 gold torques from Tara, County Meath, Middle Bronze Age, 1200 to 1000 BC. These ones here, look at those. Fabulous. So, if you want to get a look at what's in the National Museum, if because of COVID or for other reasons you can't visit Ireland, highly recommend it. Treasures of the National Museum of Ireland. Fabulous. We've got a little bit of everything in this library, we do. Holy Hannah! Yes, indeed. Thankfully. Oh my God. I closed the book. Oh, I didn't. I did. I kept my place. So yeah, lots and lots of beautifully crafted gold objects. Of course, I must include reference to those found at Newgrange in, I think it was 1842. Not long, 5 years perhaps, prior to the butchery of Douth by a labourer, which later found their way into the hands of Lord Coiningham, who dispatched them off to the British Museum, where they are to this day. But they were not, of course, associated with the original monument of Newgrange, but were obviously buried there as perhaps votive items later on. To accommodate the chiefs and princes who came to the Great Feis, Cormac built the renowned Teach Michorta, which was able to accommodate 1,000 persons. That is the great banqueting hall, which some archaeologists maintain might actually be the remnants of a Neolithic cursus monument, and which was used at once for a house of assembly, a banqueting hall, and a sleeping abode. Is everybody still in good form? We have probably 5 or 6 pages to go, have we? What have we got? We have about 4 pages to go. We'd be grand. We have 2 accounts of this hall and of the other monuments of Tara, written, the one in poetry, the other in verse, some 900 years ago. The prose of the Dindshanicus describes accurately the lie of the building, quote, to the northwest of the eastern mount, unquote. The ruins of this house, it lay in ruins then as now, are thus situated, the lower part to the north and the higher part to the south. The walls are raised about it to the east and to the west. The northern side of it is enclosed and small. The lie of it is north and south. It is in the form of a long house with 12 open doors upon it, or 14, 7 to the west and 7 to the east. This was the great house of 1,000 soldiers. And that is quoted in Petrie's Antiquities of Tara Hill. Keating, following his ancient authorities, graphically describes the Tara assembly. And here follows a long description. The nobles, he writes, both territorial lords and captains of bands of warriors, were each man of them always attended by his own proper shield bearer, Again, their banquet halls were arranged in the following manner, to wit, they were long, narrow buildings with tables arranged along the opposite walls of the hall. Then along these side walls there was placed a beam in which there were fixed numerous hooks, one over the seat destined for each of the nobles. And between every two of them there was but the breadth of one shield. Upon these hooks the Shanachie hung up the shields of the nobles previously to their sitting down at the banquet, at which they all, both lords and captains, sat each beneath his own shield. However, the most honoured side of the house was occupied by the territorial lords, whilst the captains of warriors were seated opposite to them at the other. The upper end of the hall was the place of the Olafs, and they are the chief poets, while the lower end was assigned to the attendants and the officers in waiting. It was also prescribed that no man should be placed opposite another at the same table, but that all, both territorial lords and captains, should sit with their backs towards the wall beneath their own shields. Again, they never admitted females into their banquet halls. These had a hall of their own in which they were separately served. It was likewise the prescribed usage to clear out the banqueting hall previous to serving the assembled nobles therein. And no one was allowed to remain in the building but three, namely, a Shanachie, a Bolsgara, a marshal or a herald, and a trumpeter, the duty of which latter officer was to summon all the guests to the banquet hall by the sound of his trumpet horn. He had to sound his horn 3 times. At the first blast, the shield bearers of the territorial chieftains assembled round the door of the hall, where the marshal received from them the shields of their lords, which he then, according to the directions of the Shanachie, hung up each in its assigned place. The trumpeter then sounded his trumpet a second time, and the shield bearers of the chieftains of the military bands assembled round the door of the banquet hall, where the marshal received their lords' shields from them also, and hung them up at the other side of the hall according to the orders of the Shanachie. And by the way, Shanachie is a storyteller, and over the table of the warriors. The trumpeter sounded his trumpet the 3rd time, and thereupon both the nobles and the warrior chiefs entered the banquet hall, and then each man sat down beneath his own shield, and thus were all contests for precedency avoided amongst them, unquote. And that's remarkable because it seems that there was quite an extensive etiquette laid out in terms of these noble assemblies. One is reminded of the etiquette surrounding a certain regal lady in Buckingham Palace from watching the Crown, that series on Netflix. Anyway, I digress. These accounts of the Dinshanachus and of Keating, taken from authorities now lost, will be likely to receive additional credit when we know that the statements made 900 years ago, when Tara had even then lain in ruins for 4 centuries, have been verified in every essential particular by the officers of the Ordnance Survey. The statement in the Dinshanachus made nearly 900 years ago that there were either 6 or 7 doors on each side shows the condition into which Tara had then fallen, one on each side being so obliterated that now, although it is difficult to say whether it was a door or not. The length of the hall, according to Petrie's accurate measurements, was 760 feet, and its breadth was nearly 90. There was a double row of benches on each side, running the entire length of the hall, which would give 4 rows of men if we remember that the guests were all seated on the same side of the tables, and allowing the ample room of 3 feet to each man. This would just give accommodation to 1,000. Just 1,000, huh? How many did you have at your party? Yes, of course, it couldn't. Yes, actually, Shanachie is spelled a slightly different way here. It's spelled Shanachy, which I think is a slight bastardization or anglicization of it. Rose Corain has it spelled there right, Shanachie. Barbara, yes, you're looking at Man Cave, says Kathy. Yes, Longhouse, like Vikings, a little bit like that. It sounds like it, doesn't it? Sorry, where was I? Yes, to 1,000. In the middle of the hall, running down all the way between the benches, there was a row of fires, and just above each fire was a spit descending from the roof, at which the joints were roasted. Sounds deliciously splendid. There is a ground plan of the building in the Book of Leinster, and the figure of a cook is rudely drawn, with his mouth open and a ladle in his hand to baste the joint. The king sat at the southern end of the hall, and that would be obviously the higher end, looking down on everyone. And the servants and retainers occupied the northern. That makes sense. Of course, he's also closest to the monuments on the top of the hill. The banqueting hall and all the other buildings at Tara were of wood, nor is the absence of stone buildings in itself a proof of low civilization, since in a country like Ireland, abounding in timber, wood could be made to answer every purpose, as in point of fact it does at this day over the greater part of America, and in all northern countries where forests are numerous. All or most Irish houses, down to the period of the Danish invasions, the aforementioned Vikings, were constructed of wood, or of wood and clay mixed, or of clay and unmortared stones, and their strongholds were wooden palisades planted upon clay earthworks. This is the reason why so few remains of the prehistoric buildings have come down to us, but it is no reason for believing that, as in Cormac's banqueting hall, rude palatial effects were not often produced. An interesting poem in the Dialogue of the Sages from the Book of Lismore describes the house of Lady Craige, said to have been a contemporary of Finn MacCool in the 3rd century. Though the poem may not itself be very old, no doubt embodies many ancient truths and is worth quoting from. A poet comes to woo the lady and Now I'm starting to flag a little bit, so perhaps it's a good thing that we've only a couple of pages left. A poet comes to woo the lady and brings this poem with him. Finn accompanies him. When they reached her fortress, quote, girls, yellow-haired, of marriageable age, showed on the balconies of her bowers, unquote. The poet sang to her, happy is the house in which she is, between men and children and women, between druids and musical performers, between cup-bearers and doorkeepers, between equerries without fear, or equerries. Equerries are like household assistants. They're kind of like the chiefs of the household, aren't they? And distributors who divide the fare. And over all these, the command belongs to Craige of the yellow hair. The colour of her house is like the colour of lime. Within it are couches and green rushes. Within it are silks and blue mantles. Within it are red, gold, and crystal cups. Of its many chambers, the cornerstones are all of silver and yellow gold. In faultless stripes its thatch is spread, of wings of brown and of crimson red. 2 doorposts of green I see, door not devoid of beauty. Of carved silver long has it been renowned in the lintel that is over the door. Craige's chair is on your left hand, the pleasantest of the pleasant it is, all over a blaze of alpine gold at the foot of her beautiful couch. A splendid couch in full array stands directly above the chair. It was made by Tulle in the east, of yellow gold and precious stones. There is another bed on your right hand, of gold and silver without defect, with curtains and soft pillows, with graceful rods of gold and bronze. 100 feet spans Craige's house from one angle to the other, and 20 feet are fully measured in the breadth of its noble door. Its portico is covered too with wings of birds both yellow and blue. Its lawn in front and its well of crystal and of carmogel. And that ends that bit of verse. The houses of the ancient Irish were either like Cormac's banqueting hall and Craige's house, built quadrilaterally of felled trees or split planks planted upright in the earth and thatched overhead, or else, as was most usually the case, they were cylindrical and made of wickerwork, with a cup-shaped roof plastered with clay and whitewashed. The magnificent dimensions of Cormac's palace, verified as they are by the careful measurements of the Ordnance Survey,
a palace certainly erected in pagan times, since Tara was deserted forever about the year 550. Bear evidence, like our wealth of beautifully wrought gold ornaments, and the superior workmanship of our surviving articles of bronze and clay, to a high degree of civilization and culture among the pre-Christian Irish. I have here adduced them as bearing indirect evidence in favour of the probability that a people so civilized would have been likely to have seized on the invention of writing when they first came in contact with it, and would have kept their annals and genealogies all the more accurately from the very fact that they were evidently so advanced in other matters. And I think you will agree that Douglas Hyde is making a very good case for the high civilization of the pre-Christian Irish. Yes, indeed. There we go. I hope you enjoyed that. We will read more from Hyde's History of Ireland in future episodes. A wonderful scholar. Of course, you have to remember that this is a generation or two ago. The work is actually more than a century old. Some more recent scholarship may have superseded aspects of it, but by and large, I think it retains much of its merit. A very enjoyable exploration of the past, and a very erudite one from one, as I say, who was of Anglo-Irish or originally of British descent, who came to be very much on the side of the Irish in their quest for independence. But there you go. I hope you all enjoyed yourselves. Don't forget to keep an eye out for, in the coming week, the pre-order. It's not ready yet, the page on the website, but as soon as I have it ready, I will link to it on the Facebook pages and on Instagram and Twitter, where you'll be able to pre-order monograph number 2, which, as I said at the outset, I believe will be the most comprehensive work about Bowen thus far produced. And it will not be a thick tome, and that's by virtue of the fact that there isn't actually a huge amount about Bowen in the manuscripts. But we can tell, I think, a significant story about her, nonetheless, from the sources that do exist. Yes, indeed, Neil. Stone and wood age, yes, because we know in the late Neolithic great use was made out of timber, probably oak. Back then, when there was a more plentiful native supply, a lot of our oak forests disappeared in the last, probably most of them, in the last 500 years. And that's another topic for a live stream at some point, is to talk about forests. I know we've spoken about wood and types of wood in trees in mythology, but to talk about and perhaps get an expert on. Of course, we had last week Dr. Niall Gregory talking about the dugout boats, which are mostly, almost exclusively made from oak. Fascinating stuff. I hope you enjoyed that. If you didn't, it's on YouTube. Don't forget, all of these episodes are recorded for posterity. Will be available afterwards on the Facebook page. That's facebook.com/Mythical Ireland, and indeed on the Mythical Ireland YouTube page. If you're on there, of course, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the little bell so that you get notifications when either new videos are uploaded or when new live streams begin, so that you don't miss anything. In the meantime, I hope that you all have a wonderful week. We are counting down towards midsummer, and that will be a big occasion for us in a few weeks' time. In the meantime, we are still enjoying the growing of the sun and the lengthening of the days. Of course, after that point, things will begin to contract again, and we won't see that stopping until winter solstice. But let's not go there for now. Let's try and enjoy ourselves as the year waxes out to its maximum. Have a great week wherever you are in the world. Have a great day if you're in the States or in South America and you're west of us. Have a great day. If you're somewhere to the east of us, have a great night's sleep. If you're on the other side of the world, it's probably morning time. And I hope that the day is a good one for you. Hope that the weather is good for you too. We're hoping that the sunny, warm weather stays around, at least for a little bit, to remind us of how glorious Ireland can be when the weather is favourable. In the meantime, all that remains for me to do is to give you my usual closing greetings. In Oscailga, in Irish, Ichawa, good night, or If it's not yet night, you can wait and rewind the video and play it again later. Kolosov, sound sleep, Slán go fóill, which is bye for now. And the most important one of all, I think, is Tog go bugé. Take it easy. Stay safe, everyone. Talk to you very soon. If we don't see you on episode 148 next week, we may see you on an impromptu live stream between now and then. Keep an eye out.